In at number 5, Nadab and Abihu burned alive. Nadab and Abihu were brothers chosen to serve the Lord as priests due to their family having a rich pedigree. Their intensive preparation and dedication to serving God. However, when they chose to make an offering to the Lord, they did not know it would be their last. They dressed in their best robes and made their way to the altar to make an offering of incense. It was a known fact that they were forbidden to make unauthorized offerings to the Lord, and it is unknown why they ignored this warning. Once their offering was made, a flame engulfed the altar, and the brothers onlookers watched as they were burned alive. It is said that these deaths were to show the people that there are no sins too small. The brothers should have known that the incense was an unauthorized gift. Something to keep in mind next time you light some incense in your home. Which I never do, so I'm fine. No one's burning me alive, motherfuckers. Coming in at number 4, John the Baptist is beheaded. Now this one starts with some Kardashian-style family drama. John the Baptist had been imprisoned by Herod the Tetrarch for commenting that it was not right that Herod had divorced his wife Basilis, so that he may take his brother's wife Herodias instead. John commented that it is not lawful for you to have her, which seems like a nice way of putting it. Herod has John imprisoned and was planning on keeping him there. The people saw John as a prophet, and Herod didn't want to cause any upset. For his birthday he had a gathering where Herodias' daughters danced for all of the guests. This pleased him and his guests so much he made an oath to grant her anything she wanted. Prompted by her mother, she asked, "Bring me John the Baptist's head on a platter." Herod was disturbed by this, but he had to keep his oath. That evening John the Baptist was beheaded in his cell. His head then brought on a platter to be presented to Herodias and her daughter in front of all of their guests. It is unclear what happened to the head after this, but that is some crazy revenge for gossiping about the family. That's why you should never gossip. Someone might cut out your tongue.
Number 3, the Book of Enoch. Coming up next today is going to be the stories out of the Book of Enoch, an ancient religious text that is attributed to the biblical figure Enoch. Duh. It's the Book of Enoch. I would assume that he wrote the book. Enoch is said to have been allowed to take a little tour of heaven and shown divine visions of the afterlife and the kingdom of God. Now there's a lot of discrepancy from Christian scholars if this book is considered a canonical text, but it is considered very significant and is unsettling and does have some interesting mythological aspects to dig into. The most well-known portion of this book that people discuss, people talk about, is referred to as the Book of Watchers. This section describes the descent of angels known as the Watchers. Doesn't that sound ominous? Now these angels became obsessed with human women and their beauty, and I mean, come on, can you blame them? Have you seen human women? Va-va-voom! Anyway, these angels settled with human women and they birthed a new race of beings called the Nephilim. Now the Nephilim are described as being these gigantic, monstrous, hybrid human beings. Kind of like, this is a nerdy reference, but if you've ever seen Attack on Titan, those big things, they're kind of like that. Listen to this quote about how they were corrupting humanity. "And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 meters, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds, and beasts, and reptiles, and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood." Enoch was chosen by God to deliver a message of judgment and warning to these fallen angels and their scary giant offspring. He was shown a glimpse of Judgment Day and the establishment of a righteous kingdom on earth, a bright vision of a future where the Insidious franchise is talked about with the same reverence as the Godfather trilogy. Theaters are filling up, people are pre-ordering tickets, they're getting IMAX releases, Blu-rays with special features, there's an extended Insidious universe, it's bigger than The Conjuring, it's crossing over with The Conjuring. Not all of that was in the Book of Enoch, but some of it was. Number 2 is going to be the story of Job. This next story is my personal favorite story from the Bible. I've always found it kind of fascinating, even as an outsider. It's the tragic story of Job. Job is a righteous, God-loving man who lives in the land of Uz. Not like goo, U-Z. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, Beelzebub, Pete Davidson, whatever you want to call him, the devil appears before the Lord one day and proposes a friendly challenge. The devil challenges God and says that Job only reveres the Lord because of the blessing and protection that he enjoys, and that if Job had a terrible life, he wouldn't worship God. So God kind of does one of these and thinks, oh, maybe. So God grants Satan permission to test Job's faith. Seems like a horrible thing to do to one of your subjects, but hey. So Satan rubs his little paws together and gets right to work tormenting Job. Job loses his wealth. Job loses his family, and Job loses his health. However, Job loves the good Lord, and his faith does not compromise. So Job's good buddies, his close friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you know how everybody's got a friend named Zophar, come to comfort Job. But they tell Job that all these things are happening to him because he deserves it. Suffering is a punishment for wrongdoing. Job is like, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. He maintains his innocence and questions why, as a righteous man, he must endure such immense pain. So he presents this case directly to God. He rings him up, and to try and understand these reasonings behind his suffering, why are you doing all this to me? Job remains steadfast that he's innocent and doesn't deserve any of this. So God responds to Job out of a whirlwind. God speaks to Job, emphasizing his divine power, wisdom, and sovereignty over all this creation. God asks Job a series of rhetorical questions to illustrate how little we as humans really know. And Job realizes this and humbles himself before God, puts himself back in his place. In the end, God kind of undoes a lot of that torment. He gives Job his fortune, his family, and he blesses them with more than he had before. Job's faith is vindicated, and he comes to understand that God's ways are just above and beyond his little Joby human comprehension, and he'll never understand what the big guy's doing up there, but he should just sit back and have it happen. It is presented as a very uplifting, optimistic story about having a never faltering faith, but there's something about a story where the divine creator lets an innocent soul suffer immensely just to prove a point that seems kind of terrifying. It makes humans seem like ants, It's very similar to how the family in the Insidious franchise keeps being tormented, but hey, their faith never falters, and they're always keeping their chins up because the Insidious movies are viable, so they're gonna keep making sequels, and you should see the Insidious, The Red Door, that's coming out in theaters already after this video. They didn't pay us for this. Number 1, the Book of Revelations. The Book of Revelations, also known as the Apocalypse of John, is the final book of the New Testament in the Bible. So there will be some spoilers if you haven't gotten around to reading it yet, so skip ahead to the end of the video if you don't want to ruin it. It's a highly symbolic and apocalyptic text that presents a series of spooky visions and prophecies about the end times and the ultimate victory of God over evil. So our book begins with John identifying himself and stating that he received these visions while in exile on the islands of Patmos. He then addresses 7 letters to churches all over the world, offering praise and admonition and encouragement. But the big chunk of the book, the meat of it, what we're all talking about, is these dramatic visions that John sees, these crazy, literally out of this world, these cosmic battles between angels and demons, these heavenly scenes, these things that look like they could be sweet metal album art or backgrounds from a Doom game, all these crazy battles with the horsemen of the apocalypse, dragons, the Lamb of God. Oh, big stuff, big, really cool stuff that would look awesome painted on the side of a van. The book describes a great tribulation that will come upon the earth, the apocalypse, marked by natural disasters, plagues, persecution of believers, the rise of a beast, commonly interpreted as a symbol of a tyrannical ruler or empire, and a false prophet who deceives people with miracles and leads them astray. Sounds kind of fun. John sees the ultimate victory of God, though, through all of this. He witnesses the final judgment where the wicked are condemned and the righteous are rewarded, and a new earth is described where God dwells with his people and all suffering and all sorrow are eliminated in this new heaven. And in this new heaven, there's as many Insidious movies as you want there to be. There's endless stories for the Lambert family and that demon that's got red lipstick on his face and he kind of looks like Darth Maul. And what else happens in the Insidious franchise? I've only seen the first one, but you better see Insidious 5, The Red Door, because it just came out and the Bible was scarier than it.
Starting with number 5, we have Behemoth. No, not the ride at Canada's Wonderland. I'm talking about the mythological beast that dates back to the beginning of mankind, and whose name is now an adjective for any large or powerful being. The name Behemoth originated historically from the archaic Jewish name for hippopotamus, and is described as a beast from the biblical book of Job. He is a form of the primeval chaos monster created by God at the beginning of creation, being paired up with the other chaos monster Leviathan. And according to later Jewish tradition, both would become food for the righteous at the end time. Hey, if I wind up qualifying as righteous, can I have a funnel cake instead? Once again, not any kind of reference to the theme park. These beings came first, but now I'm kinda in the mood to tackle a roller coaster. While I've established that Behemoth was a brutish beast known for incredible strength, legend says he was originally created to help stabilize the world, and is known to create chaos in humans' lives, just like my roommate. He is said to take the form of a colossally large elephant with pitch black eyes covered in white scales that appear to be falling off and has teeth the size of Mount Everest. Yeah, that's a little too big for my liking. The direct quote from the book of Job that I mentioned earlier is as follows. 15 Behold Behemoth, which I made as I made you, he eats grass like an ox. 16 Behold, his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. 17 He makes his tail stiff like a cedar, the sinews of his thighs are knit together. 18 His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. 19 He is the first of the works of God, let him who made him bring near his sword. 20 For the mountains yield food for him where all the wild beasts play. 21 Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. 22 For his shade, the lotus trees cover him, the willows of the brook surround him. 23 Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident through Jordan rushes against his mouth. 24 Can one take him by his eyes, or pierce his nose with a snare? Behemoth and Leviathan make an appearance in Revelation 13, as they try to fight against God and can be only slain by God. Thessalonians 2:8, Revelation 19:19-20, both these beasts are extremely strong, unruly, and untamable in nature. In Revelation 13:11-12, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns, like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. 12, he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And that's enough Bible babble for right now. In 4th place, we have Vine, an Earl and King of Hell. This Earl commands a simple 36 legions of demons. Because I know y'all are gonna make me do the math for this one, a legion is anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 demons. So roughly between 108 to 216,000 demons. Where's my gold star for calculating that? And how are there so many demons? The significance of his name seems to be from the Latin word vinea, vine, which is also the name given to an ancient war machine made of wood and covered with leather and branches, used to overthrow walls. In terms of his appearance, once summoned, he will show up resembling a lion and holding a viper in his hands. Now, I don't do well with snakes, so if you request him to change said appearance, he will present in human form, with long black hair, black wings, and now holding a golden cane. I know there's people out there who might be attracted to this, present company included, but don't take that as encouragement to summon him. Known as one of the most difficult demons to summon and work with, he is also one of the only demons who can identify witches and warlocks without being previously informed about their abilities, along with having the ability to tell the past and future, which I can see is kinda tempting. Vine is insensitive to humanity and cares little for harming those who summon him, making him wildly unpredictable and dangerous to summon, along with having the power to take souls without requiring permission. I repeat, dangerous.
In at number 3, we have King Herod eaten alive. Here is another example of someone upsetting God and paying the ultimate price. King Herod, a different Herod from the last story, was giving a speech to his people as he usually does. On this day, however, while he was speaking, someone cried out, "The voice of God and not of a mortal." He did not refute the claim that he was a god, and it is said that he was instantly struck down by an angel. Angels are savage. We've learnt this on this channel. They're evil. The story goes on that he did not have a quick death. He was in agonizing pain for at least 7 days. It's like it took God 7 days to build the world. Wow. 7's a good number. Like David Beckham. He was number 7. Not that I believe in God, you know. I don't believe in anything. During this time, it is said he was being eaten alive by worms from the inside out. The worms consumed him after 7 days, and this was his slow, painful cause of death. Imagine a worm consuming you. Worms are evil because you can cut them in half, and then they are 2 worms. That's you just created 2 different things. 2 worms. When 2 become 1. When 1 becomes 2. Like, what the that shouldn't be right. Like, you should never be able to cut something in half and then it becomes 2 living things. Anyway, that's and it's worse than The Conjuring. In at number 2, we have Concubine of a Levite. This story is about a Levite who is traveling with his concubine, a second-class wife. Sucks. Imagine being the second-class wife. I only want to be first class. Along his travels, he finds an elderly man who offers to give them shelter for the night in the town of Gibeah. It is a dangerous place no one should be traveling through. Some dangerous men show up at the house looking to have a good time. The Levite and old man decide to offer up the concubine to appease the men, hoping this will keep them safe from the men. The concubine is taken away by the men for the rest of the night. In the morning, the Levite finds the concubine dead outside of where he had been staying. The man is angry for what they've done to her, so he decides to get revenge on the men, so he dices slices them up. He then sends those pieces to 12 tribes surrounding Gibeah, which leads them to attack the city. Dicing your girlfriend up to get revenge on her murderers doesn't seem like the best idea, but then again, he did offer her up to them in the first place. So, you're in the wrong. You should be in the Conjuring, and I'll possess you. And finally, in at number 1, we have Ezekiel's Army of the Dead. This next one might remind you more of The Walking Dead than a Bible story. Ezekiel was brought by God to a valley that was full of bones. He walked back and forth among the bones until God asked him if these bones could once again live. God then told him to repeat a prophecy to the bones as he told him it. The bones started to move from around him. They began to form and find the other pieces of the body they had lost. Tendons and flesh appeared on them and skin covered them, but they were not breathing, they were not alive. He then told him the final words to speak, and the dead began to wake up and breathe once more. God told him that these are the people of Israel who had been killed. He was bringing them back to take their rightful place back in their land. Ezekiel then had a full undead army to take back their land which they had lost. In at 5, Aquil. Now there is very little known about Aquil, but what we know is that he is the demon who presides over Sundays and exists within Christian mythology. His purpose is to destroy and degrade the practice of keeping the Sabbath holy, which might not sound absolutely terrible, but if this dude possesses the wrong person, it could be bad news bears for all of us. Imagine the president, a prime minister, even one senator possessed, and suddenly we have to work 7 days a week without a single day off. Yeah. Okay, it's a stretch, but there's a reason he is at our number 5. Honestly, no one wants to work long weekends. Just saying. Also, apologies in advance if I pronounce all these names wrong. I'm not a demon. Shh. In at 4, Sergat. Now, Sergat is a minor demon referenced in the grimoire of Pope Honorius, but this does not diminish the fact that he is straight up evil. He is listed as, I quote, Sergat who opens all locks, and his opposite is actually our previous number, Aquil. So before we even get into this demon, we should discuss how many demons are actually mentioned in the Great Grimoire of Honorius. Who was he? Historians aren't even sure, but they do think that he was Honorius III, who was the Pope from 1216 to 1227. Now, no one is quite sure if he wrote the book or not, but he is famous among popes for deliberately conducting ceremonies to summon demons so he could banish the demons back down to hell. A little odd. This dude does not mess around. Now, how does Sergat come into play? Well, as previously mentioned, he makes appearances in the Grimoire of Honorius, and he is incredibly deceptive and cunning, making him one of the most terrifying demons throughout history. And in the Bible. Yeah, he's there too. Now, as quoted before, this dude is known as the one who opens all locks, which essentially means he is capable of understanding and opening any and all locks in the entire world, making it almost impossible to escape him or conceal yourself from him. When someone becomes Sergat's target, he relentlessly pursues them no matter how hard they try to escape, and once he reaches his victims, he frightens them by presenting them with images that result in them going mad. Yikes. Don't summon this bad boy.
Middle of the pack. In 3rd place, we have Pazuzu. If your first response was to say bless you, we have the same sense of humor. You may be familiar with references made to him in The Exorcist and the House of Ashes video game, but we're not talking about Linda Blair's acting today. As an apotropaic entity, he was considered both a destructive and dangerous wind, but also a repellent to other demons, one who might safeguard the home from their influence if he was in the right mood. Remember, if he was in the right mood. Kinda like me sometimes. He is quoted as introducing himself by stating, I am Pazuzu, son of Anubu, king of the evil Lilu demons. I was enraged in violent motion against the strong mountains and ascended them. Lilu demons are the class to which Pazuzu and his leagues of demons belong. There is also a notable connection to the earlier Babylonian personifications of the 4 winds. These beings, as depicted on several cylinder seals, have wings, and each represents a different direction of the north, south, east, and west winds. It's important to note that noted professor of ancient studies, Franz Wigerman, calls attention to the crooked positioning of the masculine west wind in seals. Franz Wigerman calls attention to the crooked positioning of the masculine west wind in seals, which is similar to the posture in Pazuzu's physical depiction. More connections appear in later seals, as this same bent-over figure takes on talons and a scorpion's tail. The main difference in their depictions is the head, and the conclusion was made that it is Pazuzu's body and not his head that denotes him as a wind demon. Another scholar, Scott Noeagle, asserts that Pazuzu's possession of 4 wings links to the term kipatu, meaning circle, loop, circumference, and totality, suggesting his control over all cardinal directions of wind was inherited from his predecessors. Pazuzu was often depicted with a man's body, the head of a lion or a dog, talons for feet, 2 pairs of wings, a scorpion's tail, and a serpentine phallus. Around now you might be thinking, Pazuzu is a long name, he has to have some sort of a, nickname or other moniker, right? Sure. He's been called the Agony of Mankind, suffering of mankind, or disease of mankind. Take your pick. This god of wind and plague is known as Lucifer's right-hand man and has the power to control and rule over other evil spirits, being known to bring forth droughts and famine. It is said that he conspired with Lucifer to overthrow God, and they were thrown out of heaven together. He is fond of corrupting the innocent and good, being known to offer help that appears good and benevolent, but actually requires recipients to request more of his assistance, sending them further and further into his debt, sentencing them to an afterlife of eternal agony. See, reality is agony enough, so I'll pass. Our runner-up for today is Sergat, first mentioned in history in 1517, whose deceptive and cunning mind make him one of the most tricky demons you could possibly think of summoning. Due to his name, he is associated closely with Saturdays. Sure, he might be the least known demon on this list, lacking the background detail that emphasizes the other demons, but he is still very much to be feared. He is known as the one who can open all locks, which may seem a little silly on the surface level, but once summoned, he is impossible to escape or to conceal yourself from unless it's on his terms. Targets of Sergat are relentlessly pursued until found, and then presented with imagery until they go mad. He was the last demon to be summoned by known demon hunter and documentarist Pope Honorarius in his grimoire. Honorarius had thoroughly documented the strengths and weaknesses of every demon he summoned during his research into the oncoming War Against Demons, but had only written ability to open locks about Sergat before his untimely death, leaving history to believe Sergat was responsible for this event. Now, I'm not going to spell out how to summon him, because I hope I've made it clear enough by now that I exist to discourage that kind of behavior, but I did find it kind of neat that one would need a nail from an old coffin to do so. Oh, and before I forget, Sergat is invisible when he manifests, making him easy to lose track of. And in first place, we have Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, Lord of Dung, and God of Filth himself. He is described visually as a smaller and hunched over creature with red or purple skin, ram horns, a forked tongue, and a long tail, along with incredibly powerful wings. Kinda sounds like a D&D character. He often prefers to appear as a fly when summoned, which may sound innocent until you consult history. Flies were believed to have been born from rotting flesh and plagues. According to Christian beliefs, he began his career as a false god, convincing men to worship him and trick them, so he could give faulty advice that would harm instead of helping those in need. Before in the comments asks for a Bible citation, since I haven't been including them for all of the listings today, I'll mention it now. In Mark 3:22, the scribes accused Jesus Christ of driving out demons by the power of Beelzebub, the prince of demons. The name also appears in the expanded version in Matthew 12:24, 27, and Luke 11:15, 18, 19, as well as in Matthew 10:25. Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? And if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your people drive them out? So then they will be your judges. But if I drive out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." Funny. Hanging around this spooky stuff has me quoting the Bible more than I ever thought I would in my lifetime. Guess I should have paid more attention in my middle school religion classes, or when I was altar serving as a kid, instead of just figuring out the perfect angle to tip a candle at to splash wax on my arm. What? I never said I was a normal kid. Beelzebub is commonly described as placed high in hell's hierarchy. According to the stories of the 16th century occultist Johann Weyer, Beelzebub led a successful revolt against the devil, is the chief lieutenant officer of Lucifer, the emperor of hell, and presides over the Order of the Fly. And I thought I was a workaholic. The 17th century exorcist Sebastian Michaelis, in his admirable history, placed Beelzebub among the three most prominent fallen angels, the other two being Lucifer and Leviathan. John Milton, in his epic poem Paradise Lost, published in 1667, identified the unholy trinity of Beelzebub, Lucifer, and Astaroth, with Beelzebub as the second ranking of the many fallen angels, a quote from him claiming Satan except none higher sat. In simple English, only second place is Satan here. His specialty is in tormenting mankind, causing wars, instigating murders, and known for his ability to place humans under the spell of other demons upon request. One thing historians haven't been able to settle on is which major sin he represents, with some claiming pride, others gluttony, but also some claim idolatry. Personally, since he allegedly originated from being a false god, I'm going to side with idolatry. But let me know in the comments which one you believe.
Coming in at number 5, we have Abaddon. The Old Testament is kind of like the dark side of the Bible. It's filled with stories of death, destruction, and more death. Abaddon, also known as the Destroyer and Angel of Abyss, is one of the characters in the good book that is not so good. Remember in the book of Revelations when God destroys most of the earth and its inhabitants, lives? Well, Abaddon is a key player in the brutal event that left the world in shreds. According to the story, 7 trumpets sounded to mark each step of the apocalypse. The first 4 attacked the earth, water, and skies, killing a third of the planet's wildlife, vegetation, fresh water, oceans, and light. This indirectly caused the death of many people, but it wasn't until Abaddon was unleashed that God struck humans directly. As the 5th trumpet sounded, a star fell from the sky, opening a bottomless pit in Earth's crust. Smoke funneled out of the dark abyss, and out came a horde of mutant locusts, commanded by Abaddon to inflict intense pain to the people of Earth. Equipped with a scorpion tail, these little monstrosities set out to torture humans for 5 months, but not to kill them. That would have been too humane, I suppose.
Coming in at number 4, we have Legion. Perhaps the most haunting story in the New Testament is that of Legion. He lived among the dead deep within the tombs, appearing not much more alive than a corpse. At night, the townspeople would hear his screams and avoid the man said to be possessed by the unclean spirits, also known as demons. No longer could they control him, he kept breaking loose from the chains that bound him at his wrists and ankles. Night and day he wandered the wild while cutting his own flesh with sharp stones and shrieking in agony. One day while traveling along the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, Jesus gets out of his boat and is abrasively approached by the man of no name. Dropping to his knees before him, the man begs Jesus not to torture him, for the Lord had commanded the evil spirits to emerge. Jesus then asked, "What is your name?" to which the possessed man replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Fearing that they would be cast away into the abyss, the many demons that possessed the man asked to be sent along the pigs in the nearby hillside. Jesus granted the demons permission, and off they went to the thousands of pigs. Now possessed by the evil spirits, the herd plunged to their death and were drowned in the lake below. This man was finally free from the legion of demons.
In at 3, Agarus. Agarus is a demon described in demonological grimoires as a duke. Under the power of the East, an old man riding upon a crocodile and carrying a hawk on his fist. Agarus is known to teach languages, however he also stops and retrieves runaways, causes earthquakes, and grants noble titles. Now I shouldn't technically be saying he, because Agarus can be a man or a woman. If the demon is a man, the man is old and riding said crocodile. If the demon is a woman, she is young and angelically beautiful. Now it's surprising how many demons are teachers. They instruct those they visit or possess, and grant knowledge and power, so I guess it's not all bad. The exorcists seem to miss out that little nugget of information. Now, although this demon is downright evil, he or she will grant you the knowledge of every language in the world. However, the bad news, he or she will only teach you the foulest and most offensive words, so say bye bye to your friends, I guess. Yeah, you'll be educated, but you will be vile beyond belief. So, you'll be me. In at 2, Renove. In demonology, Renove is described as a marquis and the Great Earl of Hell, hence why he is number 2 on our list. This dude commands 20 legions of demons, making him one of the most notorious demons throughout history, one that you certainly don't want to be messing around with. Now, what makes him quite the enigma is that yes, he's awful, the worst, but he's also somewhat of a scholar. He teaches art, rhetoric languages, and gives loyal servants the favor of friends and foes. Now, you may be familiar with this demon, as he is the one who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is horrible enough, but what makes this demon truly terrible is that he is the taker of old souls. Basically, this means anyone who is older looking, or looks a little under the weather, Renove will claim them. Also, pets are not immune to this. He will kill them too. Your best option is just to steer clear of all your elderly relatives, and consider getting a new, younger looking pet. Just saying, they gotta go. And finally, coming in at number 1, Baphomet. This name may ring a bell for you, and that's because Baphomet is a deity that the Knights Templar were falsely accused of worshipping, following which time it was subsequently incorporated into occult and mystical traditions throughout history. It first appeared in trial transcripts for the Inquisition of the Knights Templar beginning in 1307, which resulted in it being popularized in the English language in the 19th century during debate and speculation on the reasons for the suppression of the Templars. The appearance of Baphomet is that of a goat, an image drawn by Eliphas Levi, which contains binary elements representing the sum total of the universe. More interesting still, this picture of Baphomet is often used as a stand-in for Satan by Satanists and Christians alike. Now, it is a highly debated topic about whether this demon was truly good or bad, but if we look to historical accounts, Baphomet comes from a letter written by a French crusader in 1098. He describes the crusaders' enemies in the Holy Land, I quote, calling upon Baphomet prior to battle. Baphomet refers to Muhammad, the prophet. European Christian dogma viewed the worship of Muhammad as idolatry, which was harnessed by a medieval European ruler in the form of a witch hunt targeting his political opponents.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Asmodeus. A lot of folks take great issue with some of those classic vices. You know the ones: sex, rock and roll, all plenty of fun, all the bane of Puritans and teetotalers across the globe. If you delve too deeply into any of the above, you could find yourself receiving plenty of disapproving looks. Too bad, considering how much folks tend to enjoy these things. Is it possible to have too much of a good thing? Hard to say, especially these days. Who knows when the good won't be available anymore. However, traditionally folks have looked down upon those consumed by lust, whether it be carnal, money-focused, or otherwise. Thankfully, you can blame a demon for all those urges. Isn't life funny that way? Who made up morality anyways? Why not just explain it all away by saying it's totally out of your control? Beautiful, it makes up for everything. So we've got Asmodeus, the supposed son of Adam, once an angel of harlotry. Of course, his angelic properties aren't really around anymore as he fell from heaven and now lives as a demon in the underworld. With time, he became more well known for stuff like gambling and lust, and somehow became Lilith's husband, which is fun. The two of them, both labeled temptresses, produced all sorts of demonic babies to keep the fires of hell hot. There's also the famous story of Asmodeus killing 7 husbands in a row to keep one woman from consummating her marriage. Like, every time she got married, Asmodeus would show up and murk her husband before they could do the deed. But then she'd go out and get married again. At some point you think she'd learn and see a pattern and stop feeding her suitors to a demon, but hey, maybe she liked the demonic attention. Asmodeus is pretty wicked looking too. Rocking 3 hideous heads, this demon gets around by riding a dragon. This isn't his only look though, as he can appear as a few other forms to appeal to different types of people. I mentioned gambling before, and anyone with that kind of habit can thank Asmodeus for it. Gotta love it. Lastly, his powers do tend to get stronger in November, so once Halloween wraps up, be on the lookout. Lust might not stick around as easily once everyone puts away their sexy costumes, but hey. Coming at number 4, we've got Abbasathebu. Rocking with another fallen angel here, we've got Abbasathebu. A little tougher to say and spell, but just as scary and powerful. Raunchy as all hell, too. See, Abbasathebu left heaven at the same time as the devil himself and didn't take the fall that well. He used to be a flatterer of God, but once he took that trip to the down below, things got ugly. If you're familiar with the most legendary gaming villain of all time, you'll see some inspiration here. While falling, Abbasathebu was used as a life raft of sorts by other fallen angels. They grabbed at his body and managed to take hold of one of his wings. This led to the feathered appendage being torn off, leaving our poor demon to be with only one wing. Eventually it did sort of grow back, but not as it was. Abbasathebu is known for having a red, grotesque wing. That's how many recognize this demon. Badass, but probably really upsetting to deal with after many lifetimes of perfect angelic wings. Like I said, once he made it to hell, things went extra south. He rules over Tartarus, which is essentially hell jail. All of the worst reside here, suffering eternal torment in a cage of their own creation. How lovely. Abbasathebu also has quite the command of sorcery, able to cast powerful spells and persuade influential figures to act in unholy ways. For these reasons and more, it was decided that this demon could no longer have sway over humanity. Abbasathebu was eventually trapped in a pillar of air, meant to be trapped for eternity. Tough break for sure. However, many do believe that Abbasathebu will return one day and bring with him thousands of years of fury after being trapped so long. His red wing will unfurl and he will return to his vengeful and cruel ways. Who's excited?
Coming in at number 3 is Berith or Baalberith. In Christian demonology, this demon is considered the chief secretary of the underworld or Great Duke of Hell. This high-ranking official is often seen as the same as Beelzebub in some theories, but in this context they're not to be confused. His name apparently means God of the Covenant, so if any demons in hell need paperwork signed, Berith is the guy to get the job done. He's often depicted as a demonic soldier riding a red horse and sporting a golden crown upon his head. In other grimoires, his skin is also red. This demon is known for manipulating and tempting men to commit heinous acts, like blasphemy and murder. Berith is also said to be one of the demons who possessed a nun in the famous Louvier's exorcism case.
Coming in at number 2 we have Adramelech, known as the Fire King. The name Adramelech only appears in the Old Testament twice, but his stories pack a mean punch, especially with children. The first time he's mentioned, he's regarded as the son of the Assyrian king. He ends up murdering his father in cold blood while in the temple worshipping his idol. The worst part is that this story is relatively tame compared to the next time we see the name Adrammelech. In the Book of Kings, he's mentioned as being a sun god worshipped by the Sepharvites, who were sacrificing in his honor by burning them alive, hence the Fire King nickname. Adrammelech is often depicted with the torso of a man, the head of a mule, and the tail of a peacock. Okay, so that doesn't sound as scary as you're expecting a demon to be, but there's something unsettling about his looks. However, in other lore, he's considered Satan's stylist, so he must be doing something right. Another nickname he holds is Chancellor of Hell, which kinda reminds me of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine from Star Wars. Interestingly enough, both villains indirectly cause children to be killed. Adrammelech with the children sacrificed in his honor, and manipulated Anakin with the younglings, but I digress. In Robert Silverberg's short story Basilisk, he's described as guile and mischief than Satan.
In the number 1 spot is none other than Beelzebub. If you've ever heard the song Bohemian Rhapsody, then you've heard the name Beelzebub. I won't sing it again for you, I sang it in a previous video. I won't do it again. He's considered one of the big wigs in the fiery pits of hell and is sometimes an alternative name for the devil himself in Christianity. Beelzebub is one of the most powerful demons. In the Gospel, according to Mark, the Pharisees disparagingly accused Jesus of exorcising demons by the power of Beelzebub, and even refers to Beelz as Prince of Devils. He's also considered one of the 7 princes of hell by German bishop and theologian Peter Binsfeld. In 1589, Binsfeld paired each of the deadly sins with a demon, ranking them the highest authority in hell. Beelzebub has the honor of representing gluttony. Lord of the Flies is another name for this terrifying demon, given he's the leader of the Order of the Fly. He's often depicted as an actual fly or a grotesque creature with massive wings. It is said that Beelzebub was a prominent figure in the Salem witch trials. You know, the mass witch hysteria towards the end of the 17th century that had more than 200 people accused of witchcraft and led to the slaying of 19 people. Yeah, well, Beelzebub was blamed for corrupting said people and turning them on a path to Satan.
Number 5 on this list is from the 3 angels. This story comes from the Bible and accounts for 3 angels giving messages for last-day Christians. More specifically than the 3 angels as a whole, we're going to be looking at the 2nd angel out of the trio. It is written that the 2nd angel out of the group comes down and says Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now this is a tad bit confusing, so we have to break this down a little bit. Babylon back in the day was a city where some of the most influential empires ruled. However, I do not believe that this angel is actually referencing the physical place of Babylon. In the Bible, the word Babylon was connected to the Hebrew word Bile, which means to confound. Therefore, in this text, the use of the word is referring to Christians that have teachings not based on the word of God or that are confounding. The angel says that she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of fornication. The wine is supposed to represent these teachings that are not based on the word of God, and since we are fornicating with these ideas, humans are taking them and making their own churches based on those ideas. Now I know, it's a lot. Now this warning isn't necessarily about impending doom. However, I suppose it depends on what your point of view is. If you are a devout Christian or literally God himself, then to hear that people are making up falsehoods is pretty damning. Number 4 on this list is the story of Noah's Ark. A story I'm sure that most of you are familiar with. Noah was tasked with building a great ark to house his family and a pair of all land-dwelling animals. In the Bible, it says that God was displeased with what the world had come to. In fact, I quote, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth." Except, from my research, this isn't 100% true. Many experts believe it was actually the archangel Uriel who is said to have delivered this message to Noah. God sent Uriel down to earth to warn Noah about what he intended to do and deliver him with his mission of building an ark. Noah took this information and then, as we know, followed suit by collecting a pair of every single land-dwelling animal on earth and building what we've come to realize would have been a 510-foot long ark. God proceeded to wipe the earth clean with a deluge and rid it of all of its past sins. For anyone that isn't Noah though, that would have felt like some pretty serious impending doom, considering I would have watched my home get completely flooded with water and drowned to death with the rest of my people and family.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Legion. One person can be many things, but in this case, one demon is actually many demons. And these demons were so nasty, so evil, that Jesus himself had to exorcise them. Holy smokes, right? Legion is quite popular in the pop culture pantheon, and many famous exorcisms and related events seem to use him as the prime example. With so many demons dwelling within one main demonic form, they can take over the souls of people relatively easily and with varied results. However, all of the demons that make up Legion act as a sort of hive mind. They all have the same knowledge, thoughts, and reactions to things, and if one demon from the collective experiences something, they're all aware of it. With all of that knowledge and the ability to spread out all over the place, Legion can be a terrifying adversary. And even though Jesus does manage to send Legion back to hell in the Bible, there isn't much guaranteeing that many parts of Legion can't come back. Most folks only experience Legion as individual parts too. This is when the demon is at its weakest, as each individual piece of the whole only holds so much power. Were Legion to assemble all of the many together, we could be in trouble. Imagine all the limbs. Coming in at number 2, we've got Vetus. Corruption. Such a classic human form of folly. We work so hard to avoid it and even do our best to prop up those who remain pure of heart and purpose, but corruption spreads pretty much no matter what. We can thank Vetus for that. Second in command to Lucifer himself, this is the demon who wants to tempt holy people away from their chosen path. Even the most pious has a chance of being drawn in by this demon. He works very hard at figuring out people's deepest desires and then encouraging them to pervert everything they believe in to achieve said goals. Oftentimes these desires are less than socially acceptable, and at worst they can be quite taboo. Does Vetus care that he's ruining lives? Probably not. He takes on different forms to be extra convincing and makes sure to really sweeten the deal whenever he can. However, there is a way you can tell if Vetus is trying to tempt you. He only speaks in rhyme. Interesting, right? Hold on, there's a form of communication that almost exclusively communicates in rhyme and tells people to act in all sorts of wild and depraved ways. Music! Pop music specifically, but hey, do you think that Vetus is communicating with modern folks through the tunes we so often hear on the radio, telling us to consume, to cavort, to consummate? That's insidious. And finally at number 1, we've got Beelzebub. Speaking of music, how many songs explicitly reference Beelzebub? I can think of 2 right now, Bohemian Rhapsody and Beelzebub. I'm sure there are plenty more, but you can drop those in the comments. As you do that, I'll continue on my way talking about this demon. Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, the devil, but also maybe not the devil. There's so much to say about this particular demon and so little time in which to do it. I'll see what I can do with what we've got today. So the Lord of the Flies may be associated with literature read in schools these days, but back before we had a tale of British boys losing their minds on an island, that association with insects was filthy. Ruling over flies meant you had domain over demonic excrement and rot. Not a good thing, right? Throughout history, people have blamed Beelzebub for all sorts of things. He was closely associated with the Salem witch trials and cited often when folks were put to death. Plus, years after that was called off, he was again referenced in many exorcisms, both infamous and unknown. All of this pales in comparison to his actual standing in hell though, where he is known as the Prince of Demons, and rules over the other basement dwellers with an iron fist. His ultimate goal is to destroy the world, and it seems as though he's been planning this for ages, tricking people into worshipping false idols, commanding other infernal beings, and sowing seeds of discontent. Nobody's doing it quite like Beelzebub. I'd recommend learning a song wicked enough to defeat the devil, otherwise you're probably ending up going down to hell with it.
Number 5, the Behemoth. You wanted 5 more creatures, and I wanted an excuse to keep reading this thing. This book is terrifying. Speaking of, did you know that there's a herbivore creature plated in spikes and armor with a tail the size of an oak tree, head like a lion swallowing up rivers, just roaming around back then? Yeah, apparently. The Behemoth. This Goliath of a beast was one of the first talked about. Not the first beast, that's a completely different thing. Also terrifying. The Behemoth. God's secret weapon, and apparently the first thing he created. Hadn't made us in his image yet, so this hippo tank Elder Scrolls boss was what God went with. One of the most popular and revered creatures in the Bible. Quote, "Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass like an ox, he moveth his tail like a cedar, his bones are as strong as pieces of brass, his bones are like bars of iron." Yeah, this is definitely a dinosaur, right? Scholars seem to think that the behemoth is an aggressive exaggeration of a large hippopotamus or rhinoceros. Opening up its mouth and swallowing a river could literally mean it's just an animal thirsty. In 2003, French scientists working in Pakistan claimed to have discovered an extinct species of rhinoceros called a Balak Ethereum, which was much larger, much scarier, and matched the physical description given in the Book of Job. Yeah, that's terrifying stuff. Number 4, cherubim. These cute flying baby angels we see on soap ads and bottles are a lot scarier and much more sinister than the blonde cupids we're used to seeing. The cherubs, or cherubim, are God's throne bearers and appear over 90 times in the Bible. The Hebrew text says cherubim is a celestial winged being who represents God's spirit on earth and symbolizes the worship of God. In Ezekiel, cherubim are described as angelic creatures with 2 sets of wings and 4 faces: lion, ox, human, and eagle. Okay, this is getting scarier and scarier. The 4 faces of the cherubim apparently represent the 4 domains of God's rule. The lion represents wild animals, man represents humanity, ox represents domestic animals, and the eagle represents birds. Aren't those all wild animals? I don't know. The cherubim appear in several texts of the Bible, including Genesis, Ezekiel, Kings, and Revelation. Yeah, so lots of people were seeing these things, and they all kind of sound somewhat the same. They all oddly say 4 faces. Like every which way they turned, they could see a face. Some say, quote, they move quickly, using a wheel within a wheel, and their wings cover their body. Question, what's with all the wheels? People just like looking up into the sky all day must have had like severe floaters in their eyes, because a wheel and a cute baby angel thing look completely different, no? A conjoined wingspan of the 4 cherubim are described as forming a divine chariot, the so-called mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. 2 cherubim make the ark and form a space through which Yahweh would appear in Ezekiel's visions. The status of the cherubim are a sort of vehicle for Yahweh in the book of Samuel. So in a sense, they're kind of God's messengers, you know, bringing things up and down from him and to him, including him. Gotcha. A vehicle. Yeah, a vehicle. These images are terrifying. Yeah, and that's a mothership right there. That's a mothership. Okay?
Number 3 on this list is a very similar story to that of Noah. It is the story of Deucalion. Deucalion was the son of Prometheus, who was a supreme trickster and also a god of fire. Now, to fully understand why this entry qualifies, we need to ask the question, does Greek mythology even have angels? The answer is yes. And they are no different than the gods. Back then, many of the gods had the titles of angelos, because angelos to the ancient Greeks meant something slightly different than it does to us today. Back then, the word angel simply meant messenger without any other qualifications attached to it. Today, we have a very specific image of something with supernatural abilities and potentially a tie to God. Therefore, with all of that being considered, Prometheus, even though he is considered a god, would have also been considered an angel to the ancient Greeks if he were to deliver a message, which in this story, he does. The message, or warning, as I should say, is to his son I previously mentioned, Deucalion. He warns him that Zeus has become angered and intends to completely flood the area, moving the world on from the Bronze Age. Deucalion, along with his wife, built a chest. Not an ark this time, it was a chest, and it didn't have to be 510 feet either. This chest only housed the 2 of them and protected them from the torrential rains and flooding that Zeus unleashed for 9 days. After the 9 days of Zeus' wrath, the rain stopped and the boat landed ashore. It was then up to Deucalion and his wife to repopulate the earth with the help, guidance, and magical ability of an oracle. If the legend holds true, then if Prometheus hadn't have warned Deucalion of the oncoming onslaught, then all human life would have perished at the hands of an angry Zeus. Number 2 on this list is the destructive story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah were 2 ancient cities written in the Bible that were disobeying the word of God. The Bible reads, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me." Now, God's not the type of guy that you want to mess around with. He had decided that he was going to destroy these 2 cities for disobeying him and sinning. Now, an angel heard about this and wanted to try and spare these people. He pleaded with God and had him agree that if he were to find 10 worthy individuals in the city of Sodom, then the entire city was to be spared. God agreed to this, and 2 angels were sent down to earth to find these worthy and kind 10 people. When they got to the city of Sodom, Lot, the gatekeeper, invited these travelers into his home to feed and house them. He was completely unaware that they were angels and was doing this out of pure kindness. However, when the travelers arrived at Lot's house, the people of Sodom wanted to get it on with the travelers. One of the main sins of the city of Sodom was their deep ties to homosexuality. And back then, God considered this to be a sin against his word, and he wasn't happy about it. Anyways, Lot refused to hand the travelers over to the people of Sodom, but the group refused to leave. This sadly led the angels to believe that finding those 10 people in this city would be impossible, and that the entire city was ultimately to be destroyed. Lot and his family, though, were saved by the angels and flown to safety. I suppose that this story is less of a warning of impending doom than it is to try and help stop the impending doom. But considering an entire city got completely annihilated, I felt like it needed to be included. Number 1 on this list is Moros. Moros is the god of doom, and if we stick with our previous assumption of what classifies as an angel in Greek mythology, then Moros will fit the bill. Unlike all of our other friendly angels though, Moros was ultimately evil at his core. He was born to Nyx, the primordial goddess of the night, and his father was Erebus, the primordial god of darkness. It's no wonder that he became the god of doom when your parents are the god of darkness and the god of the night. Now Moros, unlike the other angels on this list, is a shapeless being and appears more as a shadow and manifestation of darkness than anything else. Now you're probably thinking, okay, god of doom, son of darkness, all of that, why did this guy warn people about impending doom? Well, I suppose it was less of a warning and more of just an FYI. You see, Moros, even though he is referred to as the god of doom, is often called the god of impending doom. He knew your fate before you knew it. For him, it was written in stone and it was destiny. What he would often do is tell people in advance about their impending doom, effectively warning them as to what is about to happen to them and how they're going to die. If these people were to try and escape their fate, then they would intervene with destiny, which would apparently cause greater chaos across the world. It was said that even Zeus was scared of our angel of impending doom because he realized that even he could not interfere with destiny. So rather than give one warning of impending doom, Moros gave hundreds of them. The problem was that you couldn't really do anything about it that wouldn't cause more harm. There is 1 or 2 cases of people actually subverting their destiny and escaping his warning, but for the large majority, this meant game over.
Number 5, Nephilim. This one I can get behind for sure. How the pyramids were built still baffles me, and reading all about these things at least makes my brain relax for a second. The giants, the talls, the long neck people, the Nephilim. Again, never been a Bible guy myself, so no judgment if you say all this happened, but I'm just catching up on all this stuff. But in short, the Nephilim were like the offspring of angels and human women, according to Genesis 6:1-4 and Jude. The Nephilim are also mentioned in Numbers 13:33, but it is likely that by this time in Israel's history, Nephilim was used as a term for a tall, intimidating peoples. It's plausible that the Nephilim were both half angels and half giants, making them absolutely huge and absolutely super strong. The Nephilim were the children of the sons of gods and daughters of men, and Christian scholars have theorized that the sons of gods were actually these demonic fallen angels who reproduced with women. Being the offspring of partial angelic heredity, the Nephilim were considered mighty men who are of old, the men of renown. The ancients. These people were huge, claiming that they were like 5 times the size of an average man. In the Hebrew Bible, a group of mysterious beings or people of unusually large size and length who lived both before and after the flood were called Nephilimus, sometimes translated to giants. Even the fallen ones, from the Hebrew nephil, meaning to fall. Seems like these people were writing about similar stuff, huh? Spooky. Number 4, 200 million horsemen. This next one is not really a creature as much as it's the end of a lot of all of us. All this Armageddon stuff they were saying, that's some pretty strange stuff that's on its way. Book of Revelation stuff, you know? Quote, I saw as God wanted to show me the horses and the men on them. The men had pieces of iron on their chests. These were red like fire, and blue like the sky, and yellow like sulfur. The heads of the horses looked like the heads of lions. Fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. 1/3 part of all man was killed by the fire and smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. Word for word. Horsemen or ancient biblical technology? This sounds horrifying. Also, 200 million? That's a lot of flying flaming horses just trucking around the skies and sands like giant tanks, firing fire out of their mouths and nose. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. And from the midst of all this came likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness. Okay. You put a Baja hoodie on me at a Dave Matthews concert and hear me saying all that stuff, you probably just think I'm some sci-fi stoner. Nope. This is riveting material, folks. I need to read this thing front to back. Apparently this force was supposed to have taken out, or is going to take out, 1/3 of the entire world's population. I know like 3 things that can do that. Pandemics, missiles, and floods. However, if men and horses showed up with lion heads breathing fire, it's safe to say it's game over. Number 3, unicorns. Hold up. This is scarier than the devil, right? Unicorns? Really? Oh yeah. No, not the glittery ones with Farrah Fawcett hair like Hercules rides. More like a firstborn bull. Giant, with a huge spear on its head. He has majesty, and his horns are the horns of a wild ox. And with them he shall gore the peoples, all of them, to the ends of the earth. Okay, yeah, that's really aggressive. I guess unicorns were a little bit scarier in the Bible, huh? A couple times these things are brought up too. It seems like a lot of people were seeing these. Yeah, I'd say a hunk in a suit on a television series is much less scary than a monster horse goring you to death. A Ram is mentioned 9 times in the Hebrew Bible. It's been translated to unicorn in the King James Version, and some translations as oryx, which was seen as a wild ox or rhinoceros. Quote, "And the unicorn shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness." Yeah, harsh. I mean, rhinos and other single-horned animals do this. The Bible describes unicorns skipping like calves, traveling like bulls, and bleeding when they die, so they were real and very mortal, mostly believed to be an exaggeration though. Even Julius Caesar speaks of them. Quote, "A little below the elephant in size and appearance, color, and shape of a bull, their strength and speed are extraordinary. They spare neither man nor wild beast." Were the ancients seeing like giant extinct rhinos, or were these flying evil narwhals just goring everyone to the end of the earth? Who knows? Sure sounds like it. Number 2, locusts. Dude, I'm already afraid of the 12-inch flying praying mantises that do exist today. I can't imagine what these things looked like. Imagine a dog-sized flying insect blocking out the sun because there's so many of them. Abaddon's locusts. These things were terrifying. The Bible has this to say about them. The 5th angel, apparently Abaddon, sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by smoke from the abyss, and out of the smoke, locusts came down upon the earth and were given power like that of scorpions. These demon bugs are well detailed in the Bible. They're described as, quote, horse-like creatures preparing for battle, adorned with crowns of gold above their head. Their face is like a man, but woman's hair with lion's teeth. Their body was locust-like, covered with iron breastplates. They have scorpion-like stings on their tails and razor-sharp claws, and the sound of their army will be like 1,000,000 horses marching to the battlefield. Dude, that's a locust? Like a locust, the bug? No, I don't think so. They will be freed by their master Abaddon from the bottomless pit and will torment all of the remaining sinners on earth for 5 months. Abaddon is described as the king of the army of locusts. Yeah, guy's really into bugs. Yeah, that's like some Fear Factor stuff right there. Just like 1,000,000 bugs swarming you? No thanks. And coming in at number 1, the dragon. Okay, there's some speculation here that this thing is the devil himself. The devil and the dragon. But also this thing apparently lives with the devil. I don't know, people were saying mixed things, but important thing is, things weren't too literal back then, and they were really spiritual. People were just trying to explain what they were seeing and feeling the best way they could. But yes, there was dragons. Yeah, we have the skeleton bones. okay? And before you're picturing something fun like Dudley the Dragon or the ones that talk in The Hobbit who sit atop gold, no. Picture when it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Lightning leaps from its mouth. Flames of fire flash out. Smoke streams from its nostrils like steam from a pot heated over burning rushes. Its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. Yeah, this thing, terrifying. Tremendous strength of Leviathan's neck strikes terror wherever it goes. Its flesh is hard and firm and cannot be penetrated. Job 41:18-23. This great dragon, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all the angels. And I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs leap from its mouth of the dragon, the beast and the false prophet. They are demonic spirits who work miracles and go out to the rulers of the world to gather them for battle against the Lord on that great judgment day of God the Almighty. He seized the dragon, that old serpent who is the devil, Satan, and bound him in chains for 1,000 years. The angel threw him into the bottomless pit, which he then shut and locked so Satan could not deceive the nations anymore until 1,000 years were finished. Okay, yeah, that sounds like one giant amazing cutscene from a God of War game. Just chucking a dragon into a pit? Also, it's 2022. We better lock that thing back up. It's been more than 1,000 years now, no? Quote, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems. Okay, so it wears 7 crowns. Maybe this thing is the devil. It's mentioned numerous times in the Bible. I've seen Game of Thrones. This thing is scary.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Midianites. Okay, so before we get into any Christian, Judaic, or Gnostic demons, we should probably fire some movie demons into the spotlight. We've come so close to talking about this movie so many times, so why not today? Nightbreed is a cult classic that never really hit the big times. Released back in 1990, director Clive Barker didn't get final cut and was disappointed with how it ended up. Years later, a majority of the unused footage was discovered and Scream Factory managed to release a director's cut. Based on Barker's short story Cabal, this is quite the empathetic take on monsters living in a graveyard. At the beginning of the flick, the audience is introduced to some rapid-fire demon craziness, resulting in the impression that these grotesque monsters are evil troublemakers. It soon becomes apparent that they are far from evil, and the so-called good guy psychotherapist is the real madman. The Midianites, even if they have horrid features, are a largely peaceful race of monsters. They live on their own beneath the cemetery. Midian has its own unique culture, customs, and laws, and they have no intention on starting any trouble with humans. In fact, humans are the ones who decide they've got a problem with them before launching a full-scale assault, complete with an Albertan militia. Through some wicked mental gymnastics by Dr. Decker, played by David Cronenberg, folks are convinced that the Midianites are the last bastion of evil and must be destroyed. However, once the battle begins, it becomes very clear that all they want to do is live unimpeded. In fact, the entire movie proves how good these beings truly are. They accept Boone into their ranks and even give him a second chance after he breaks their laws. They take good care of their children and do their best to offer all their citizens comfort and supplies in order to live. It just goes to show that humans tend to demonize the other in an attempt to simplify our world when we should be embracing those differences. Maybe just letting the other live in peace is the answer after all. Don't tell the colonies. Coming in at number 4, we've got Amon. Alright, now that I've done my requisite movie talk, let's head into some more mythical demons. We'll start with Amon, Marquis of Hell that governs 40 infernal legions. He's quite the ugly sucker, which might contribute to his bad reputation. According to Johann Weir, who wrote of Amon in the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, Amon or Amon is a great and mighty marquis, and cometh abroad in the likeness of a wolf, having a serpent's tail, vomiting flames of fire. When he putteth on the shape of a man, he showeth out dog's teeth, and a great head like a mighty nighthawk. He is the strongest prince of all other, and understandeth of all things past and to come. He procureth favor, and reconcileth both friends and foes, and rule 40 legions of demons. So he's got a wolf body, a serpent's tail, and a raven's head. Nice. Most folks would be afraid of a creature like this, which makes sense. Chimeras of all types tend to freak folks out. However, Amon is a nice guy. He's known for reconciling friends and foes, making the world a better place for all involved. If he were truly evil, he would encourage more discord between people instead of helping them get past it. Amon also procures love for those seeking it, and if that doesn't warm your cold heart, I don't know what would. So if you're feeling lonely, let Amon play Cupid for you. Who knows? Maybe the demon will come back with info on a hunky hunk or babely babe. Just pray it's not a succubus.
Number 3, the Leviathan. Okay, at first I was like, oh, that's a roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland. No, this vicious monster was actually modeled after this vicious monster. The Leviathan, the second of the great monsters described in the book of Job. This Leviathan is an absolute massive sea monster who's impervious to human weapons, breathes fire, and emits smoke from his nostrils. So this is a Zelda boss for sure. The Leviathan is probably related to another ancient monster called Lotan, a seven-headed giant serpent who represents primeval chaos, as with pretty much every other biblical creature does. Hey, these things aren't meant to be cute and fuzzy. There's some less exciting theories that insist the Leviathan is just a dramatic interpretation of a crocodile or anaconda or maybe a plesiosaur, resembling something like the Loch Ness Monster. But that doesn't explain the breathing fire thing, or the size. Was this giant sea snake a water dragon? Because apparently it's like 300 miles long. Yeah, terrifying. Scary thing now is many different religions and cultures have their own version of the Leviathan. Tiamat, Hydra, Jormungandr. Maybe this thing was just hunted into extinction. I don't know. What do you think? Number 2, Archangel Michael. It is said that the angels are not humans, but creatures made from God's creation. I've also seen what the Bible describes angels looking like, and it's not handsome people with wings. Apparently a lot of these things people really couldn't even describe what they were seeing in front of them. But we'll get to what these things look like in a minute. Of those creatures, Satan, aka Lucifer, is one. The one. However, here is even one creature that Satan fears more than any creature, and that's fellow Archangel Michael. Or Saint Michael. Some say they're brothers, some say they were on the same team for a bit. This is some good stuff, people. Quote, "Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him." Revelation 12:7-9. Okay, so hold on. He and them are all down here with us? That's terrifying. Apparently Michael led that army that won, so whatever scares Satan scares the hell out of me as well. Also, all these pictures and statues of him and like window panes are all of him like wielding a giant sword made of light, just stepping on Satan's back as a hero. That's pretty intimidating, not gonna lie. And coming in at the number 1 spot, Ophanim. Okay, so what angels actually looked like apparently was like giant geometrical feathers with eyes and a consciousness. Some had horns, some had hooves, lots of golden metal colors. This next thing doesn't even make sense to my brain. I feel like this is an anthill trying to understand an iPhone. Quote, "As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparked like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel, intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures were faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around." Ezekiel 1:15-18. First off, is this thing even a creature? Yeah, everything I see here is an alien. Is this just us trying to process some sort of like energy being with eyes? Because if I saw Lucifer that looks like the hunk on the Netflix show, and then I saw this thing? One of the Dead Sea Scrolls interprets them as angels. Late sections of the Book of Enoch interprets them as class of celestial beings who don't sleep and guard the throne of God. Whatever this thing or things are, it sounds and looks absolutely horrifying. How could you paint that on a ceiling? I would just give up and paint wings and a halo as well. For real though, like that is a spaceship of some sort, isn't it? I mean, I understand the times, maybe the science wasn't there, but this thing is straight out of a sci-fi novel.
Number 5, the Plagues of Egypt. So coming up first is going to be the Plagues of Egypt, a classic, horrifying biblical story for Bible fans of all ages. While the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, the good Lord was trying to show the ruling pharaoh at the time that he'd better let all of the chosen people go or there'd be some serious trouble. Now the pharaoh didn't heed the warning and was divinely punished 10 times, one for each of the pharaoh's false gods. Now maybe you've heard through cultural osmosis that there was a rain of frogs and locusts, but unless you've spent some time in between the pages of the Bible, do you know all the other horrific plagues? Because there was 10 of them, a lot of horror going on. Let's go through them in order. First up, we had the Nile River running red with gore, resulting in dead fish and undrinkable water. Plague number 2, the frogs. You know what a frog is, I don't need to explain that, they're like these little green guys. Then came the lice, next plague, then the flies, kind of similar to the lice really, and then the big livestock plague. This one was kind of fun. It killed off large swaths of farm animals, chickens, cows, others, dead. Then we had everybody's favorite plague, the boils. painful, disgusting red sores and boils manifesting on the Egyptian skin. Scrumptious. Now the boils were cooled by the next plague, which was a scourge of hail that destroyed the crops and lands that gave life. And then the locusts came. Everybody loved the locusts. They're like little bugs that eat everything. The next plague was a thick, never-ending cloud of darkness, which was probably fantastic for vampires and real dour for anybody else. Now, if you've been keeping track at home, that's 9 plagues, meaning we got one last plague, and that's the death of all firstborns, which afflicted every family in Egypt. Finally, a win for the middle children of the world. The good Lord asked all the Israelites to paint a bit of goat fluid on the door to make sure the angel of death knew they were chill and not to pox any firstborn children. The plagues of Egypt, it's kind of a story that showcases that when you make God angry, he takes that really, really personal. I think that's literally what they mean when people are talking about divine retribution. It's stuff like this. It's plagues of locusts and frogs. And if you're looking for way more scary videos that might be about Insidious, might be about the Bible, we've got all of that and then some on the channel. Seriously, we got, if you can think it up, we got 2 or 3 videos on it. So click on through, hit subscribe, please ring that little bell as well so you don't miss a single one of our videos as soon as they go up. But do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more stories loosely related to Insidious coming up for you right now. Number 4, the Witch of Endor. Now coming up next is the story of the Witch of Endor. It's not the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nazgul, and this isn't involving the forest moon of Endor where the shield generator for the second Death Star was built. It also doesn't have a lot to do with Insidious. We've crossed all 3 of those words off. I'll tell you what the Witch of Endor was. Now the first king of Israel, Saul, who was a notable good man, was facing a severe crisis. He had disobeyed God and was facing an impending war from the Philistines. So in desperation, Saul sought out guidance from God, but was left on divine red by the big man upstairs and was being ignored. His pleas were unanswered. Saul did what any of us would do in a similar situation when you can't get a line to God. In trouble? Better call the Witch of Endor. Oh, did you think I was going to do like a better call? Never mind. Saul rang up the Witch of Endor, a necromancer of some renown who was able to help Saul conjure the spirit of the dead prophet Samuel, hoping to gain a little insight for the upcoming war against the Philistines. Samuel's spirit appeared and spoke to Saul. Samuel's message was a very grim one, letting Saul know that he was not going to do terribly well in this war and was going to lose the war and also die. The prophet reiterated that Saul's disobedience and rejection of God had led to this outcome, you know? Mind your manners, mind your P's and Q's, maybe you won't die in a war. Overwhelmed by the encounter, Saul fell to the ground in despair. The witch then provided him with a meal before he departed. Now the story of the Witch of Endor serves as a cautionary tale against seeking supernatural guidance outside of God. I think that's a pretty easy moral to follow. Don't contact a necromancer. Be careful with your spiritual mediums. Josh Lambert in the first Insidious film got lucky when he contacted a trustworthy medium, and I don't remember the name of that character, but you might not be. So Josh Lambert, King Saul, pretty similar.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Lilith. Speaking of succubi who tend to get a bad rap, let's talk about Lilith. Legends say that Lilith was Adam's first wife. She lived with him in Eden for a while, but was expelled for refusing to submit to him. After this, she became a legendary demonic figure, famous for stealing babies and seducing young men. Not the best reputation, I know, but there have been worse. Leave it to history to demonize women who didn't listen to their husbands. Still, after centuries of bad press, it seems like Lilith has turned a corner. Modern scholars seem to have found a different way to interpret this famous sensual seductress. After being created equal to Adam, she didn't enjoy being treated as a lesser being, so she left. In doing so, she opened herself up to a whole lot of slander from all who felt that she needed to be put down. This created all the legends involving her body tendencies and succubal urges. So while she's often portrayed as a baby-snatching demon with a huge personality, it's more likely that she's just someone who decided to force her independence before that was socially acceptable. No wonder so many witches and feminists look up to her. Coming in at number 2, we've got Gopp. Alright, I'm gonna catch some flack from some of our more old-fashioned viewers on this one, but hear me out. Gopp is a demon prince in human form who incites love. Classic. Love is good in the world. But in some readings, he provides further services which may or may not be interpreted as good by some in our modern society. He provides medical care for women, which is fantastic, but he's also known for transforming women to make it easier to get a lover and also renders them infertile. So they can find lovers more easily and will not have any accidental babies. Of course, if you plan on having kids, this is a bad thing. But kids, in this economy? So depending on your position on these topics, Gopp would be really awesome or not that. But add in his powers of philosophy and liberal arts, and you've got a pretty wicked college professor. Gopp is known for teaching these topics, making people invisible, stealing familiars from magicians, making men stupid, and carrying people quickly over long distances. I'd say these are all top-notch powers, especially the making men stupid part. I feel like I'd be a whole lot happier if I just didn't think so goddamn much, but maybe that's just me. To conclude, Gopp, even though he looks like a pretty classic horned winged demon, isn't actually all that terrifying. And finally, at number 1, we've got Bile. If you ever saw Bile, you'd freak out. He is a spider-esque creature with the heads of a cat, frog, and man all on full display. Or at least that's how he appears in the dictionary Infernal. Either way, he's described as a combination of the 3 creatures. This kind of appearance would cause anyone to freeze up, but don't worry too much. He's also able to make folks invisible, which has plenty of utility. Of course, being invisible isn't too useful for doing good deeds, but I suppose that choice falls upon whoever invoked this odd demon. A more utilitarian power comes in the form of making people wise, and let's be honest, this is a much needed skill these days. Both of these powers are stronger in October too, so you know he's a Halloween fiend. I'm not sure if that makes him less scary or more scary, but anyone who loves October is a friend of mine.